Well, I have a rather short teaching today, I think. At least I planned it kind of short, so we'll see what happens. But it's kind of short, and it's, like I said, it's one of the top three things that God tells Israel to do, but nobody ever talks about it, because it's called judging. And the only thing you ever hear in our world anyway is, don't judge, don't judge, don't judge, don't judge. The Bible never says that, not once. It says don't judge wrong. It never says don't judge. It says don't judge wrong. And yet, right around 20-some times, I think it's 22 times, it says judge. Judge righteously. Judge properly. Judge in your gates. Judge in Israel. Judge individually. Judge in your cities. Judge, 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 judge. And yet, because the New Testament is written in Greek, there's this huge mental shift that took place when the Gentile world, the Roman, Catholic, Christian, Hellenistic, Gentile world got a hold of the Bible. And they shifted the whole thinking toward one little phrase that's mistranslated. Don't judge. Judge not, lest you be judged. Well, what's he quoting in the Torah when he said that? It doesn't say don't judge. So, this is what we're going to be talking about. And it's a huge, huge subject, which is why it's a small teaching, because I'm just going to take one little bite from it. That's really all we can do on one Shabbat. But it is an enormous subject, and it's hard to understand if you're not used to judging. Like if you have that voice in, well, I teach art in middle school, and every day there's one or two or three kids that I'll say, you need to shut that voice up in your head that tells you you can't draw that, whatever it is they're looking at. And I tell them, of course you can't draw it, but you can look at the shapes that make the thing, one shape at a time. But you can't do that unless you shut that voice up. So I tell them, if you want to do it out loud, that's fine with me. Shut up. And they turn into schizophrenic kids. Shut up. But if they can shut the voice up in their head, then they're like they've cleared the land to where they're a blank slate and they can just do something different. But if you keep, Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting what? A different result. It ain't gonna happen. You gotta clear your decks, start from scratch and do something else. Now that applies to judging. All of us are supposed to judge. I don't know, 1,000 times a day? Something like that? That's why he gave us a brain is right. But more than that, that's why God gave us the Torah. And, it's good to judge using your brain, but you miss 50% of the time. If you learn how to judge by the Torah, then you have a very clear and precise way to judge. But that's a lifelong deal. But you can at least start. You can at least start by getting rid of that voice in your head that's told you your whole life, judge not, lest you be judged. Because it's not God, it's not Yeshua, it's not anybody. It's Hellenism. That comes straight out of Hellenism. And you're going to have to do the research on your own to prove me that I'm telling you the truth, that comes right out of Hellenism. Don't believe me. Go research it for yourself and find how the environment of judging did not take place in Hellenistic environment and why. And it will shock you to your core because it's in us. It's disgusting. But you got to do that research on your own. So, if you can start kind of like from scratch, like from a ground that's had all the weeds pulled out and there's just nothing there, then maybe you can start to understand what our 3 verses at the beginning of the Torah portion say. But if you come at these with preconceived ideas, it's not going to work. You're going to come at it twisted, perverted, morphed, instead of just starting like a little baby and go, I don't know what that means. So let's try to start from scratch. All right. So there's 3 verses I want to look at. They're the first 3 verses in the Torah portion. Now the title of the Torah portion is Shoftim, Judges, which is why we're talking about judging. It's called Judges, Judgments, and Righteousness. Judges, Judgments, and Righteousness. So by the end of the teaching, here's what I'm hoping to do. I'm hoping to teach you how to apply what's called Mishpat Tzedek, righteous judgments, into your life. Into your life. It's a process. And I want to show you how the process works so that you can apply it, hopefully. But you have to apply it for it to work. All right, first verse. Judges and law enforcement officers. You could translate it police if you want. That's fine. Judges and police or law enforcement officers, you shall give for yourself in all your cities, everywhere where the Jews live, everywhere, that the Lord your God is giving you, for your tribes, and they shall judge the people. Who shall judge? Nope. Give judges and law enforcement officers in all your cities so they can judge. Who's going to judge? The judges. The judges. I think in this case it's just the judges who make the judgments, and then the law enforcement officers carry it out. Like, what's the name of that show? That has, yeah, Law and Order. It's like that, Law and Order. So the law part is from the judges, and then the order part is from the law enforcement officers. So the judges are to judge the people in Mishpat Tzedek. They're not just supposed to judge, they're supposed to judge how? Righteously. Okay, so here's the problem. They might be judging, but they might be judging 30% good, or 60% good, or 70% good, or 82.3% good. How do you know? Right. How do you know that every single judgment in Israel that's coming from the judgments is perfect? There's got to be something to judge by, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Yeah, you need a baseline. Yes. Okay. I'm going to break here and say this. This is the whole problem. Hellenism as a structure, as a religion, as a culture, has hijacked the Bible. And they've created their own structure, their own baseline of how to judge what's right and wrong. And they ignore the endless sea of volumes that the Jewish people have written to tell us how to judge. The first volume, anybody know what it's called? First volume of what? Of the Sea of Knowledge that tells us how to judge? Mishnah. The Mishnah. That's the first one. Tells us how to judge. What's right, what's wrong. How do you do it? How do you not do it? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? Gives you in incredible detail how to judge. And it starts with the Torah. On top of the Mishnah comes the Talmud, which expands it 150,000.3 times. It just explodes into every conceivable judgment. Now, if you remove that from your life, what are you left with? Judge not, lest you be judged. And this is the problem. Guesswork, exactly right. This is the problem. There's got to be some way to say yes and no. And God says, I want this in every single city, right? Yes? Okay, he says, give for yourselves in all your cities, wherever the Jews live, I want judges who will judge Mishpat Tzedek. Okay? Next verse. You shall not twist or pervert judgment. Now, most Bibles don't translate it judgment. They translate it something else. I can't remember. No, I can't remember what the word is. But they don't say judgment, but that's what it... Maybe, I can't remember. But it's the word mishpat in Hebrew, judgment. Don't pervert judgment. Does it say don't judge?
No.
Hello? Does it say don't judge? No. It says don't twist judgment. From this. From righteous judgment. Don't twist it from that. Not don't judge. Judge. Just don't twist it off that baseline. You shall not show favoritism. Don't take a bribe, because bribery blinds the eyes. And twists righteous words. Now we have another phrase that has the word tzedek, or righteous, in it. We started with righteous judgment. Now the next verse says divrei tzadikim. Divrei tzadikim, righteous words or righteous things. It could be either one. But in this case, we know it's words because it's talking about making judgments. Bribery blinds the eye of the wise and twists righteous words. Okay? So the words have to be straight, and they have to be tzaddik, righteous. So we have two verses now in a row that have the word righteousness. Now we got a problem. What the heck does that mean? If you don't know what righteousness is, you have no idea so far what this is saying. Right. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, it's used the same word twice, and it doesn't really define it for us. Now there's a third verse that says it again. Tzaddik, righteous. And it starts out with it. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Righteousness and righteousness you shall run after. Tirdof means to run after. Okay. So what's righteousness? Did it define it for us? Then how are we going to run after it? I don't even know what it is at this point. You see what I'm saying? It's got to be defined somewhere. It has to be. Does that make sense? Hello? Okay. So we're at Devarim 16. We're 2/3 of the way through the book. We're halfway through the book of Devarim. That's the last book in the Torah. By the time we come to the last book in the Torah, we're supposed to know what righteousness, tzaddik, is. Would that make sense? Come on, guys. Would that make sense to you? Okay. So obviously it has to be defined before this. Tzaddik. In order for God to say, now, guys, set up judges when you come into Israel so that in every city, in every town, you have righteous judgments being made. You know how to make righteous? You know what righteousness is? Oh yeah, you told us in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then part of Deuteronomy. We know. Guess what it is? Judaism. He's already defined it for us multiple times. He has said, we've looked at it in the last 3 weeks, over and over and over and over. Do the mitzvot, and then what? Good. Then listen to them. Speak. And if you do the mitzvot, and you listen to it speak, what do we receive? You're both right. The blessing, right, which is the kingdom. We receive the blessing, which is da'at et Adonai, the knowledge of God. So we've already been told this multiple times. Do the mitzvot. The mitzvot speak to us, yes? Yes. And as they speak to us, we get the knowledge of God. Okay. That's what is described in the Bible as righteousness. And he's defined it. We're going to look at a couple verses that define this for us. But we've already seen it. All right. So then we come to these verses, and it says, make righteous judgments. And we should be like, okay, I get at least an idea of how to do that. And then it says, don't twist those words, because that'll twist the judgment. It won't be righteous. Okay, I can do that. I know what the words are, at least some of them. And now he says, run after it. Run after it. Righteousness, righteousness you shall pursue. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. That you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you. So it's basically like an anchor to keep Israel in the kingdom and the land of Israel. It puts us where we belong. What puts us where we belong? Righteous judgments. Okay, now that's what the rabbis are going to say. So we have some statements here. If you can follow this, good. If you can't, I'll just do my best. But this is kind of hard to follow. But basically, that's what they're saying to us. That God sets up righteousness. He says make righteous judgments. It sticks you in the land if you run after it, and you're good. This is in the Talmud. As it is taught in the Baraita, when the verse says, tzedek tzedek tirdof, one mention of, now look how it translates it. Justice, not righteousness. And all the commentators use that word, justice. Now because of this, we've got a huge problem in Judaism. And it's this. You need to comprise good law courts so that when people come, you can make good judgments in our environment, in our country, in our cities, in our towns. I'll give you an example. When a homosexual comes and pleads for equal rights to marry another homosexual, you need to make absolutely sure that you make a righteous judgment and you keep everything completely fair and you grant them that request. That's what it's become. It's become social justice. Justice. And this is a huge problem in Judaism. You can go in any lawyer's office in America and Israel and some in Europe and some in Australia, and you can find this beautiful plaque that was painted, and they sell it through many, many Jewish sites, and it says, Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice you shall pursue. And it's in all the offices of the Jewish lawyers. But they're not seeking mishpat tzedek, they're seeking justice. Like just justice, just like normal American justice. And this has been taken and kind of massaged down in a Hellenistic environment, which America is, and turned into justice instead of righteousness. God is not looking for justice. He's looking for righteousness. Now, if they could correlate, fabulous. But if they don't, he's going to pick righteousness, not justice. So he says, Tzedek tzedek tirdof. One mention of tzedek is stated with regard to judgment. And one is stated with regard to compromise. Do you understand what he's saying? He's saying in every single case there has to be compromise. I agree with him. And he says it, God says it twice, because one is different from the other. One is just strict justice, just strict judgment, strict right and wrong. But the other one isn't. The other one, you kind of back up and you look at both sides and you try to compromise. And I like that. It's good. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. Now Rashi says, our main guy, the guy we look at a lot, just righteousness, righteousness you shall pursue. Go and search after a reliable court. Now he gets this from Sifrei, which is a midrash, and also from Sanhedrin in the Talmud. And then he says, justice, justice shall you pursue, so that you may live and inherit the land. And he's saying that's the key. He's saying the appointment of honest judges is what anchors us in God's territory. It anchors us. It's enough to keep us in Israel and keep us in the kingdom if we run after a good court. Do you understand what he's saying? He's saying, God said set up good courts that have righteous judgments. If we pursue that and we really, really go after making good judgments, that's enough to get the kingdom into our life. That's what he's saying. It's enough to get us in Israel and keep us there. You get what I'm saying? That's a big, big, big statement. Doesn't sound big, but it is. Yeah, it is heavy. He's saying, how do we get that God set up here amongst Israel? And that's what he's saying. How do you do it? You run after a good court. Make sure you set up a good court. I'll give you an example. You're not going to like this example, but I give it to you anyway. It's just the first thing that comes to my mind. Say we're doing Kiddush, and somebody asks for prayer. And you say the first scripture that comes to your mind. And then me, in my arrogance and big-mouthedness, go, excuse me, you're wrong. And everybody freaks out. Right? Hello? Yeah. Wouldn't that happen? Everybody would freak out. Oh, he's so rude. But the truth is, this is a court. This is a sha'ar, a gate. Every congregation is a gate. Every congregation is set up to make righteous judgments. How are you going to make a righteous judgment if you don't open your mouth and give I'll use the word, correction? We're going to talk way, way more about this. I'll give you more examples. I'll try to make it as clear as I can. But I want you to be thinking about this. It trickles down to us. How do we get the kingdom in here and into our lives? That's what we're shooting for. And he tells us how to do it. Run after good, righteous judgments. But you can't do that keeping your mouth shut. You can't. It's impossible. Now, Ibn Ezra, one of my favorite commentators from Spain, he comes later, about a generation after Rashi, and he says, Tzedek. Moshe speaks to the disputants. That means people in a court case. Moshe repeats the word justice to indicate that one should pursue justice whether one gains or loses. What? Does that sound familiar to anybody from the New Testament? No? You New Testament scholars? No? Okay, I'll tell you what it says. Shaul said, quit going to law court one with another. Rather be defrauded. Doesn't he? Rather be defrauded. Doesn't he? Okay, this is from Judaism. It's from Judaism. Moshe repeats the word justice to indicate that you should pursue justice. Whether you win or lose, pursue justice. Tzedakah, righteousness. Mishpat tzedek, not winning or losing. Mishpat tzedek. They might be the same, they might not be the same. And we got to learn how to be flexible enough to go, okay, no, you're right. I'm going the wrong way because of my heart. I want to go toward Mishpat Tzedek. What do? You need to repent. Okay, I'll repent. That's how it works, basically. Now, I know you're not used to this because you're Christians. I know. I'm used to this because I'm a Jew. You're not used to it because you're Christians. But this is where we're headed. This is where we're headed. We're headed toward a biblical congregation. This is not a biblical congregation. It's just becoming to move in that direction. But we're not. We are not a biblical congregation. We're just starting to learn how to move in that direction. But I want you to know that this is where we're moving. Okay? And it's going to take some growing pains, and it's going to be uncomfortable. Don't get scared and don't freak out. Just keep an open mind. If you got questions, ask questions. But whatever you do, don't zip your mouth. Open your mouth. Okay? We got to do it together. So whether we lose, whether we're going to win or lose, we need to be moving toward the mishpat tzedek, the righteous judgment, whatever that is. Okay, who says what the righteous judgment is in a congregation? There's a problem. Now this you're not used to. What you're used to is everybody kind of being like an American amorphous democratic group. Majority rules, right? No, that is not how a Jewish congregation works. The rabbi is part of it's called a Beit Din, which means a house of judgment. He's the head of the house of judgment, and under him are a few judges who know what they're doing, and together they make judgments. This is right, and this is wrong. And hopefully he's not too much of a jerk like me, where he can do it, fairly decently. I didn't used to. I think I can now. All synagogues have that. All synagogues. All temples do not have it, but all synagogues do. Yes. So, the final say comes from the rabbi, because supposedly, theoretically, he has more Scripture, Torah, in him than everybody else. At least that's theoretical. He should. So that's what we're moving toward. It's not a dictatorship, but it is not a democracy. Somebody's got to say right and wrong. You understand what I'm saying? Or else how can you make a mishpat tzedek? And it's majority rule. Nobody's making a mishpat tzedek. Right, everybody's opinion. And we're right back where we started. So, I'm not going to start doing it today. I've been practicing this for many years, but we are going to start doing it together, hopefully. This is where we're moving. Or, now he gives us some different possibilities. He says, whether you win or lose, run after mishpat tzedek, or the word is repeated to indicate that one should pursue justice as long as one lives. How long are we going to live? Forever. So he's saying something huge here. He's saying two. Mishpat tzedek, or run after tzedekим in this world and in the world to come. As long as we live. So again, it's the focus on getting the mishpat tzedek from the kingdom into our life. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. The repetition of the word connotes continuity forever. And now gives us another possibility. Or the word is repeated for emphasis. Now he's saying this because he's a Mexican. That's why he's saying that. He's in Spain. When I first got married to Eileen, I started hearing Mexicans go like this. Strong, strong. And I'm like, why are you repeating that word? Hungry, hungry. What? Why don't you just say hungry? No, I'm hungry, hungry. Okay. And at first, first couple of years, I was like, what are you doing? Well, it works the same way in their culture, in the Spanish culture, as it does here in El Paso, that you repeat a word for emphasis, and that's what he's saying here, which I thought was kind of cool. So we got several possibilities, but they all are pretty much consistent with what we're looking at. Now, Nachmanidis, another one of my favorites. He was the head rabbi of Spain about the same time as Ibn Ezra in Spain. The reason for the repetition, justice, is to indicate that the judges should judge the people with righteous judgment. And you must also pursue righteousness constantly by going from your place to the place of the great sages. How many of you study the Mishnah during the week? There's a problem. How many of you study the Talmud during the week? There's the problem. How many of you study the Midrashim during the week? There's a problem. How many study the prayer book and all the commentaries in it during the week? Okay. We're supposed to be reading them, pursuing their words and their vast ocean of wisdom every day. Now, this is just my personal pet peeve. I have a real problem with laziness. That's just me. Eileen is the same way. We both hate laziness, especially spiritual laziness. It drives us nuts. And it seems to me that most people, they rise to a certain level and they plateau in their observance of Judaism. And they're done. And the rest is just, chilling, sitting back, taking it easy, and just, okay, now feed me. Gimme, 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 gimme. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's good. And it just doesn't really change from that point. But Judaism doesn't work that way. It never has. You must, I've said this, I don't know, weeks and weeks. You must be adding to your prayers every single day. Add something. I told you last week, I worked on one word for the whole week. I finally got it, by the way. Me'achin. You know who helped me do it? My brother Dean. He gave me a mental picture in my head, and I immediately got it. Me'achin. I got it. I can do it anytime I want. It took a week to add one word, but I was adding one word. And guess what happened? I immediately had it speak to me, and I got revelation from it. Immediately, when I got it nailed down. What do you think of that? I've been telling you week after week after week, the more Torah you do, the more it's going to talk to you, and then what do you get? What do you get? The knowledge of God. As soon as I got that word, me'achin, and I got it nailed down inside of me, it immediately spoke to me, and I got revelation. That's for me. God spoke to me. So, that's how it works. I'm begging you, don't go to a plateau and stop. Don't do it. It's killing you spiritually. If it's time to stand, stand. If it's time to sing, sing. Sing louder than everybody. If you don't know the words, then wake up, stop being lazy, and get them memorized. They're on the screen every week, week after week after week, and yet you still in your eyes look like you don't know them. So learn them, for God's sake. They're right here in front of you. The prayers, it's the same thing. We go over and over and over, and yet when we come to it, you look in your eyes, you look like, what is that? Like, come on. It's up to you. You're grown human beings. It's up to you. Don't plateau. I did it for years. I know what I'm talking about. Don't plateau. Keep climbing. Keep adding. And if it's one word, hey, at least it's one word. Great. Great. At least you did something. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I guarantee you from personal experience that if you'll do it, you may get a small revelation, but by God, you will get a revelation. God will speak to you through his voice by Judaism. You do a mitzvah, the mitzvah talks to you, and you will get more knowledge of God. And that's how it works. That's the education of God. So he says, you must also pursue justice, second line, constantly by going from your place, wherever you are, to the place of the great sages. Now, he was talking physically, that they had to get up, thank you, that they had to get up and go to Nahariya or to, Yavna or wherever, and go seek out the teaching of the sages. Well, they're dead. They're dead for 1,700 years. But we have their words. So get up from your place and go seek it. Go read. It's there. I mean, God, we got the internet now. You can do it anytime you want. But in the Midrash of Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, and he tells us where it is, the rabbis interpret it by way of a secret. Now he tells us a deeper secret. tzedek. This is his attribute of tzedek in the world. As it is said, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. After that, it is written that you may live and inherit the land. Remember, it's the kingdom. It's not the land of Israel. So in other words, run after his righteousness, which we should know what it is by now. We're going to talk about it some more. So that you can inherit the land, the kingdom. If you will judge yourself, you will live. Where did that come from? I mean, why does he stick that in there? If you will judge yourself, you will live. He's talking about running after righteousness, right? And getting that righteousness into our life. And then all of a sudden he says, it also means we judge ourselves so that we can live. So here's what he's saying. It's written twice, once for us and once for everybody else. We got to judge ourselves first. And then we can judge rightly in dealing with other human beings. But what if we're not judging us? It's a problem. Tzedek. You will live. If not, he will judge you and affirm his judgment over you against your will. So here's where the teaching is going. It's called Shefa. We're going to talk about Shefa. Shefa means flow. And this is the way Mishpat Tzedek works. We judge ourselves when we hear the Torah, or we don't. If we do, God gives us something. If we don't, he gives us something else. And we've already seen what he gives us. Judgment. He'll make a judgment if we don't. Now, I know you recognize that from the New Testament, I'm pretty sure, right? Okay, so we won't have to talk about that. And why is justice mentioned twice? Because it is written from the brightness before him. What the heck does that mean? That's weird. That's mystical. That's like deep. Now what he's saying is this. We're not going to go into it, but what he's saying is this. That from God's throne will come light or judgment. That's what comes. That's tzedek. Either light or judgment. And it's our choice. And that's where we're going in this teaching. Let me say it again. Tzedek, run after. Run after it. If we do it with us, if we judge us, we will receive light. And I'm going to show you how that works. If we don't listen, what are we going to get? Judgment. And God's going to make the judgment. But here's the trick. He's going to use humans to do it. That's what we're going to talk about. All right, so let's talk about what in the world is righteousness. Well, he's already established it from the book of Bereshit. He's already told us what righteousness is, which, by the way, nobody seems to understand, especially once they crack open the New Testament. They're done. Everything dissolves. Everything in the Torah just dissolves, and it just becomes a mess. But if you stick with the Torah, it's super, super simple what righteousness is. Avram also said, "You have given me no son. So behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, one who will come from your own body will be your son." And he took him outside. He said, "Now look toward the heavens and count the stars, if you can count them." And he said to him, "That's how your seed is going to be." Then, at that point, he had Emunah. Emunah is translated faith, but it's really the word, what they badly say, amen, which is really what in Hebrew? Amen, which means foundation. Something absolutely solid as a rock. It doesn't mean, I had faith, and so I stepped out in faith believing. That's nonsense. Where's the solidity in that? But in Judaism, it doesn't work that way. In Judaism, it's super, super simple. Abraham did the Torah, right? He did the watch. He did the, I'll translate it badly, commandments. He did the statutes, and I'll translate it badly, the laws. He did Judaism. 4 words for it. Genesis 26:5, right? So, when he did it, what happened? It spoke to him, and he got the knowledge of God. That's faith. But he had to do it first. And I'm telling you the same thing. You've got to do it first to receive faith. That's what righteousness is. That's what tzedakah is. That's it. He had faith in the Lord, and God credited it to him, vayachshaveha, like applied it to him, counted it to him, what's that word, like imprinted it to him as tzedakah, righteousness. God called the faith righteousness. Does that make sense? He did Judaism first. That's how it works. All right. So that's our baseline. That's our baseline. Now we come to Romans, and everybody loses their mind when they read this because there's no Jewish concept of faith behind it. But now that you know what the Jewish concept of the faith is, please read it in that context. For in it, now when he says it, it's the previous verse. He's talking about what's called the gospel, which, by the way, I do not like that word because most people don't even know what the gospel is. It's the whole story from Genesis to Malachi. That's the gospel. It's the story from Genesis to Malachi. That's the gospel. And he says, for in that, the entire story of Scripture, the tzedakah of God is revealed, shown from faith to faith. What does faith mean? Understanding. Rock solid foundation. So it goes from understanding to understanding to understanding to understanding to understanding, and you build your knowledge of God. That's righteousness. I don't care what anybody says, that's what righteousness is. You can define it any way you want, but that's how, from the beginning of the story, God defines it. That it's doing Judaism. Judaism talks to us. We get understanding, the knowledge of God. That's righteousness. Period. Does that make sense? Okay. And then he quotes this verse, and then he applies it. He says, as it is written, that tzedakah will live by emunah. What does faith mean? What does faith mean? Understanding. That tzedakah, the righteous, will live by his understanding that he got. That's what righteousness is. Understanding God. That's in Habakkuk 2:4. All right? Now that we know what righteousness is, we should have known before, but if you didn't, now you know what righteousness is. Now what is a mishpat tzedek, a righteous judgment? Because that's what our Torah portion is about. All right, there's several verses I want to look at that kind of lay out in order how this worked. Leviticus 19. Do no twisting, no perversion in mishpat, in judgment. Don't show partiality to the weak or preference to the great, but in tzedakah you shall judge. You shall b'tzedek tishpot. In righteousness you shall judge. How are we going to do that? Unless we know what's right and what's wrong. Right? Now here we're in the book of Leviticus. We've already had Genesis, Exodus. Now we're halfway through Leviticus or more. By this time we should know what a righteous judgment is. I'll give you an example. How old does a girl have to be to marry a Jewish man? Nope, not 14. Not 16. Huh? How old? 12? Nope. How old? Give me a number. Good. 6.
6?
Yep. I did a whole teaching on this, and everybody rejected me for teaching it.
Wow.
Okay. Guys, that's a mishpat tzedek. Sorry. That's a righteous judgment. Love that face. That's a righteous judgment. Sorry, but that's in the culture that God created and set up. That's a righteous judgment. Out of millions of righteous judgments that you don't know. Weird, huh? Isn't that weird? But it's a righteous judgment. So, best we don't judge, huh? Best we don't judge God for setting that up and designing it, right? Right? You still don't look convinced. Okay. All right, I've just given you one out of many, many, many examples that we don't know. All right? But he says, you shall judge righteously. So then, whatever your world is, whatever your culture is, whatever your family is, whatever your church is, comes along and tells you how to make righteous judgments. And everything changes. Especially if you've never been taught right from the beginning. Right? So we got problems. We got big problems if we're going to know God. Don't think you know God. We don't. We don't. The only way to get to know him is to have the knowledge of God by doing Judaism, have it taught to us, and we grow in our understanding. Period. And everything after that is good and good and good and good and better and better and better. But please don't think you understand God just because you're born again. That's nishka, however you say that. It's not right. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. Judge not, lest you be judged. Torah says just the opposite. Does this say judge not, lest you be judged? It says judge your neighbor. Judge your neighbor. Just do it tzedek, righteously. Which means you got to learn how to do it righteously. Does that make sense? All I'm doing today is setting you up with problems. That's all I'm doing. I'm saying you had a problem here and a problem here and a problem here and a problem here. And hopefully we can start solving them over time. But really that's all I'm doing today. I'm trying to knock down your house of cards that we've built our lives on that are just nonsense. So at least maybe we can start like children and go, boy, I just don't know. I don't know. And then start learning. That's what I'm doing today. Deuteronomy 4, or what great nation, amazing nation is there that has statutes and mishpatim tzedikim, judgments as righteous as this whole Torah. That's what the Torah is. What is Torah? Righteous judgments. What is Torah? Righteous judgments. And that's what we're supposed to do, yeah? So how are we supposed to judge? By Torah. Does that make sense? There's our baseline. God says, judge righteously. Then he says how to do it. Which, by the way, he already did at the beginning of this book, Deuteronomy. He says, what great nation is there, Israel, that has filling every square millimeter of it these righteous judgments of the Torah. So that's how we're supposed to judge, by the Torah. That's our baseline. That's our yes and no. That's our right and wrong. They're not laws. They are absolutely not laws and commandments. They're things that talk to us, acts that talk to us so we can get to know God. Now, Deuteronomy 16 in our Torah portion, the verse we looked at. Judges and law enforcement officers you shall give for yourself in all your cities, and they shall judge the peoples with righteous judgment. I thought it already told us that everybody's supposed to judge their neighbor, didn't it? Okay, so then why is it now saying the judges? All right, so this is what we're going to look at. This is called Shefa, flowing down. It's a huge concept in Judaism, Shefa. Say Shefa. Means flow. I guess S-H-E-F-A-H. Shefa. Shin, Fe, Hey. I'm sorry. Shin, Fe, Ayin. You're welcome. So, it starts big with the nation, the head of the nation, heads of the nation. Then it trickles down to each city, yes, where there are judges in each city. Then it trickles down further to each individual, so that the entire nation is judging righteously to a man and woman. So you have a big overarching, it's called the Sanhedrin, or the Supreme Court of Israel. Then you have lower courts under that. Then you have the city courts in every city. Then you have each individual person and family. That's how Judaism gets the knowledge of God into its people. By Shoftim, by judges. So that at the end of the story, every human being becomes a judge. So there's never a place to say to a believer, judge not, lest you be judged. What we should be saying to believers is, you need to judge. You need to make a judgment. You need to know how to make a judgment. Are you thinking about what the Torah says about that judgment? See what I'm saying? We need to be encouraging other believers how to make right judgments, not telling them not to judge. Romans 2 says this, but do you suppose this, you idiot? House translation. But do you suppose this, you fool, who passes judgment on those who practice such things? But you do them. It's not that you pass judgment on somebody else. It's that you're doing the same stupid stuff. How dare you? You're a hypocrite. That's what he's saying. He's not saying don't judge. He's saying get your life right and your mind right so that you can judge. Yeah, judge yourself first. Exactly. So that you will escape the judgment of God. I'm going to read it again. Do you suppose this, you fool, who passes judgment on those who practice such things and yet does them as well, that you're going to escape the judgment of God? All right, so now we're going to come to Shefa. If God like he trickles down his judgments, his righteous judgments to us, they come in the form of two things, light and judgment. And it depends on us. Light and judgment. And by the way, this can happen hourly, monthly, daily. It can happen constantly. So God will give us light or he'll give us judgment depending on what we do with the information he gives us. And then in Romans it says, but because of your stubbornness and unrepentant heart, you're storing up wrath for yourself on the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment, the mishpat tzedek of God. So there in the kingdom, that's what it's all about, is the mishpat tzedek of God. They call it what do they call it in the church? The Great White Throne Judgment? Is that what they call it? Okay. Nonsense. In Judaism from day one, we've always said at Rosh Hashanah, Dayan Ha'emet, God is judge, and on Rosh Hashanah, he judges every soul, every year. And he's going to do it at the end, in the day of the Lord, at the end of the birth pangs, for the whole world. And it's still called Rosh Hashanah, and it's still called Yom Hadin, Day of Judgment, and he's going to do a Mishpat Tzedek for the whole world. And it's not one judgment, it's billions of judgments that are very nuanced and detailed. And how is he going to do that? Through humans, through people. Us. Are you aware that you're going to be judging in the kingdom? It's in 1 Corinthians what? I just blanked out. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. It says, don't you know you're going to judge angels in the kingdom? We're not just going to judge angels. We're going to judge humans for 1,000 years, over and over and over and over and over and over and over. So you better get used to it now and start doing it. Does that make sense? It's going to take practice. You're not just going to wake up in the resurrection and know everything. It's just not going to happen. You're going to start where you end here. We start in the kingdom where we end here. That's called the knowledge of God. We say we have 32.7% knowledge of God. When we arise in the resurrection, we start with 32.7% knowledge of God. And we grow from there. That's how it works. Psalm 94. Now, this is the verse that I want to really hone in on as to how to apply this to our life. Blessed is the man whom you spank, whom you discipline. Now, the word in Hebrew, well, there's several words for discipline. I want to teach you the word musar. Say musar. Not musar like a moose. Musar. Musar. And it means literally discipline or correction. It says many, many times, musar is derech chai, the way of life. Musar, discipline, is the way of life. Then we come to America, and we're Americans by God, and ain't nobody going to tell me what to do. And all the musar goes out the window. And then, in some incredible move of arrogance and pride, those same people who think, I go, well, I'm doing Judaism. I'm doing Judaism. I'm going to do Jewish things. Impossible. Because Judaism leads to, is completely wrapped up in musar, discipline. This is what I'm going to show you. How do we get it into our life? Blessed is the man whom you discipline, Lord, whom you teach from your Torah. Now that's different. Who you discipline and who you teach from your Torah. Teaching is not discipline. Discipline is spanking. That doesn't teach nobody nothing. It just changes our heart. But teaching is different. Teaching is, here, let me show you this. Let me explain this to you. I'm going to preach to you. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to explain to you and give you faith. These are different. Blessed is the man whom you discipline and whom you teach. There are two completely different things here. And this is what I'm saying. When God gives us whatever he's given us, a mishpat tzedek, we can respond one way or the other way. We can resist it, and what are we going to get? Discipline, musar. Or we can accept it, and what are we going to get? Teaching from the Torah, and grow in our Emunah, our faith. Does that make sense? I mean, that's really simple to me. Did I explain it okay? Okay, good, because that to me makes perfect sense. And that's what I'm going to show you. And it says that this happens so that you may grant him relief from the days of problems. Okay? So that you can get relief during the days of problems. So picture a big problem in your life. I'm thinking about my daughter right now. All right? That's a problem. I can respond one of two ways. And so can she. With a soft heart, and then we'll get teaching from the Torah, or we can get angry and bitter and say, why me? Why me? And what are we going to get? What are we going to get? Musar, discipline. And that's how it works. sometimes many times a day. So that you can grant, but the whole purpose of it is for God to grant relief during the problems. And then he says, until a pit's dug for the bad guys and they fall in it and die. But we don't. Until a pit is dug for the wicked, not for me. For the Lord will not abandon his people or leave his inheritance. Now look what he says. Because judgment will return to Tzedek. It's going to go back to Tzedek. So we might as well figure out how to get there now. Because he's going to return the whole world to Mishpat Tzedek in the day of the Lord. So we might as well figure out how to get that now in our life. Yeah? Does that make sense? That's what he's saying. This is a Jew talking here in Psalm. And he's talking to Israel, Jews. And he's saying in our culture, in Judaism, we can do one of two things. We can get musar from God, or we can get teaching from God. So that, look, it's going to go back to Mishpat Tzedek anyway. God making righteous judgments, us making righteous judgments. So we might as well get this in our life now, during the days that are bad. So, you go through something bad. What's the first instinct? Oh my God, what? Freak out. Instead of, go ahead and spank away. Really, those are our only two options. And what I see 95% of the time is believers doing the first. Instead of just saying, go ahead and discipline me. Okay. Judgment is going to return to Tzedek. Tzedek yashuv mishpat, return to mishpat. To Tzedek. And all the upright in heart will follow it. So here's how it works. In order for us to make righteous judgments, because God wants that filling the whole land, yes, from top to bottom, starts big, trickles down small, so that everybody can judge. In order to make righteous judgments, picture flow. It's just like water dripping down, flow. And this is how it disseminates. It's not a flood, it's just a little flow. Shefa. And God's given pictures of this in the scriptures, and this is probably the main one, the land of Israel. Where do the headwaters of the Jordan start? Hello? Where do the headwaters of the Jordan start? Anybody? Lebanon, Mount Lebanon. Right, Mount Lebanon, way up here at the top of Israel is Mount Lebanon. The snow-covered mountain that you can go skiing on all year long. Remember I told you can ski in Israel? Isn't that weird? And it's a snow-capped peak way up here on the border of Lebanon called Mount Hermon, or Mount Lebanon, which is a picture of the temple, yes? We saw that a few weeks ago. And those headwaters flow all the way down here. Where do they stop? Where do they stop? Come on, guys, where do they stop? The Dead Sea, where nothing can live. Okay? That's how it works. I just drew a straight line. That's how it works. It flows down to death. It flows down to death. All right? Now the word shafa, there's the root for shefa. It just to overflow, to flow. That's all it means. It also means, shafa also means an abundance. That church, what's it called? Abundant Faith Center? Okay, there's a whole entire religion in America based on that word, abundance. Why? Because we're in America, the land of abundance. So what do you think's going to happen? Well, in Hebrew, it's a really cool word, shefa, to flow, abundant. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at that. That's abundance. This whatever flows down from God, and we know it's mishpat tzedek. That's abundance. Not money, Not health, not healing, not all that. That comes from doing Judaism, just as a natural course. And it's not even a big deal. And he's got a bunch of scriptures here that tell us where this word is used, shefa, in the Bible. Shefa is the abundance of the sea, wealth obtained by, from the sea, from the nations, from the Gentiles. Shif'a, a great multitude, abundance of people. It's also used for water in Job. Also used of men in 2 Kings. It's also used of camels in Isaiah and Ezekiel. And then shif'i, which is same thing, abundance. So that's all it means. It's a very, very simple word. But guys, it's huge in Judaism. And it's in, the place you're afraid to go. What's it called? Kabbalah. There's tons written about Shefa in Kabbalah. And Kabbalah is not Jewish mysticism. It is not. Kabbalah means to reveal. It means revealed. That's all it means. Something that's hidden that's revealed to us. That's all it means. Every morning, for the last 3 years, I pray this. We're supposed to do Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam lo she'asani goy. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who has not made me a Gentile. I add, and other Jews do too, she'asani Yisraeli. You've made me an Israeli, a Jew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam lo she'asani eved. Blessed are you, Lord our God, everlasting King, who has not made me a servant. I add, and others do too, she'asani avdecha. You've made me your servant. And the third one, which nobody likes, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam lo she'asani isha. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who has not made me a woman. 90% of Judaism in America won't even say that prayer. So, some of us add, she'asani mashpia lishi, who has made me the flower to my woman. In Judaism, a man is called the mashpia. A husband is the mashpia. That means the one who gives the flow. Shefa, mashpia, same word. You hear me? And the woman, guess what she's called? Mekabel. The Kabbalah, the receiver, the one who receives. The man is the giver, the woman is the receiver. That's the way God set it up. And I pray this every morning. And I think about this when I pray it. That God is doing shefa to his body, to his woman. He's flowing down to her, whatever. But now we know what he's flowing down to her. He's flowing mishpat tzedek, righteous judgments. And we're going to see that it's two different forms. So in this picture that we have here of shefa, we have Lebanon. It flows down the Jordan, which flows down and ends at the Dead Sea. That's shefa. Here's another one. It's in Zechariah 4. The angel woke me and said to me, what do you see? And I said, a menorah of gold with its bowl, geula, on top of it, has 7 lamps on it, also 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side, one on the left side. And I said to the angel, what is all this? And the angel said to me, this. And everybody misses this. This, zeh, the thing that he's seeing, is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel. This weird-looking stuff is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel. So whatever this is, an olive tree on the right, olive tree on the left, a geula on top, there's a pipe, another pipe, there's a big branch, another big branch, and then 7 lamps on top of the menorah. That is the word of the Lord. That's what he's saying. So after he tells him it's the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, he says, okay, what are the 2 olive branches that are beside the 2 golden pipes that empty
the oil from themselves, and he said, these are the two sons of fresh oil, B'nai Yitzhar in Hebrew, who are standing by the Lord of the whole earth. You could say it's the two messiahs, but whatever it is, it's the anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth, and you have oil coming from them, plus oil coming from the Geula, the bowl. That's where it starts. That's the headwaters of Mount Hermon. This is the beginning of the story of flow. That's where the word of the Lord starts. It doesn't start with, oh, Jesus, speak to me, speak unto my heart about this situation. If you go there, you're a million miles away from this. Whatever the word of the Lord is by the Spirit of God must start in Torah. And that's what this stuff is. It's the word of the Lord, the Torah. The two olive trees, and there's a Geula. And then, out of the two olive trees and the Geula, what happens? Shefa. And it flows through the it flows into the olive branches, which flows, there's an olive branch and an olive branch, which flows into the golden pipes, which flows into the menorah that has the seven spirits of God. That's all Jewish stuff. And that's the word of the Lord. Make sense? It's very complicated. But just to make it super simple, it's flow. It's Shefa. It's Shefa from Judaism, from Torah. And that's how it works. So it goes from the Geula and the olive trees to the olive branches to the golden pipes to the menorah lamps. Here's another example of Shefa. How righteous judgments work. How do we get it into our lives? How do we make it work? How do we change us so that we can get righteous judgments into our life and get the knowledge of God? Here's another example of how it works. In Daniel 2, Nebuchadnezzar sees this giant statue, head of gold, arms and chest of silver, belly and loins of bronze, legs of iron, feet of clay and iron mixed together. And then there's a big giant rock that's cut without hands and comes and blasts the whole thing to dust. And God says, that's my kingdom. This is when it's going to happen, during my kingdom. And that's a picture of my kingdom. And then he says, Babylon is the head of gold, Medo-Persia is the arms and chest of silver, Greece is the thighs and loins of bronze, and then the legs of iron is Rome. And so after the vision, and after Daniel interprets it, in Daniel 2, the end of it, it says, then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon. It's a province. And chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel requested of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the administration of the province of Babylon. So we have here, you're going to love this, biblical bureaucracy and red tape. And it's there for a reason. You're an American. That means by nature you hate red tape and bureaucracy. That's just the way it is. It's from God. Maybe you've never been told that, but it is from God, and I'm going to show it to you. And if you resist it, guess who you're resisting? So we have, so far, under Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel being promoted, and there's bureaucracy. But then there's another passage in Daniel 5, after Medo-Persia comes and takes over Babylon, and here's the chapter in which they do it. Chapter 5. They're all partying with the gold and silver vessels that were in the temple of God, and they're worshiping demons with them in the court of Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. And these fingers, I don't really understand it, but these fingers show up and start writing on the wall in this giant court where they're getting drunk worshiping demons. And it says, Mene, mene, tekel, ufarsin. Mene means weighed. Weights and measures. And there's two of them. Mene, mene. Weighed, weighed. And then it says tekel, which means it's like a falta in Spanish, wanting. You lack. And then ufarsin, which is and Persia. Farsin means Persia. And that very night, Belshazzar was judged and murdered, and in came the Medo-Persians that very night and took over Babylon. And it transferred from Babylon to Medo-Persia that very night after Daniel interpreted it. So, there they are, and they read it, and after Daniel translates it for Belshazzar before he's murdered, Belshazzar gave orders, and they clothed Daniel with purple, put a necklace of gold around his neck, and issued a proclamation concerning him that he now had authority as, what does that say? Third ruler. That means there's the king and then three guys that run the whole nation, the whole kingdom. You have the king, then you have these three guys, and Daniel's one of them. And then under them, all the guys who run the royal city. And then under them, you have all the leaders of the provinces. How do we know there's 127 provinces? Anybody remember? I'm not sure what you're saying. Esther chapter 1. It says Ahasuerus was on his royal throne, right? And there were leaders and people from all 127 provinces. There's 127 provinces in Medo-Persia. Well, that started here with Daniel. So we have rank. We have bureaucracy. We have government. I know you hate these words. Sorry. This is how it works. Spiritually. This is spiritual. I'm going to show it to you. You may not like it, but this is spiritual. You don't like it because you're Americans. Nebuchadnezzar and then Belshazzar, Daniel and two other leaders. Under them is leaders of the royal city and leaders of the 127 provinces. This is in the Bible for a reason, guys, to show Shefa, that it flows down in order through people. Gesund. Now we come to the passage you hate. Romans 13. Look at what's in purple in a bigger font. Look at that. Look at those words in purple in a bigger font. Well, every person, again, let me back up just a hair. This is a Jew teaching Jews and Gentiles how to live a Jewish life and how to implement the Bible into their Jewish life. And this Jew says, in a disgusting, corrupt Roman environment and culture, he tells them every person is to be subject to the governing authorities. Why? Because I don't like these words any better than you do. No authority exists except from God. There is no authority except from God. None. Now think about what that means for your life and all the authority that you have said, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to resist that. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. You are basically saying, God, you ain't going to tell me what to do. It ain't going to happen. You're not listening. I need you to listen. There is no authority except from God. Where does that come from in the Torah? Anybody know? It's in Genesis, it's in Exodus, it's in Leviticus, it's in Deuteronomy. There's about 27 verses that say this in the Torah, that there is no authority except from God. And it trickles down. And it is not, I'm going to say it as loud as I can, it is not our job to judge if authority or law or judgment is righteous or unrighteous. That's not our job. That's above our pay grade. It's God's authority. Our job is to figure out, what are you saying through these knuckleheads? That's it. It is not our job to say that authority is wrong, ever, unless God takes us, lifts us up over them so that we can help and teach and guide and correct them. Other than that, you're talking about American politics.
Judging our neighbor doesn't qualify as that.
Yes, judging our neighbor does not qualify as that. I'm talking about bureaucracy, government, red tape, right? Red tape, all that. Listen to me again. Nowhere in Scripture does it give us the authority to question or judge authority. Ever.
Even if they're wrong.
Even, who's to say they're wrong? You? See, you're right back there. You get on that and you're on a merry-go-round that goes around and around and around and around, even if they're wrong, even if they're wrong. Who says they're wrong? That's not our job. Our job is to learn righteous judgments, mishpat tzedek. That's it. But how do you do it? You got to get yourself down to nothing. Nothing. No idea, no preconceived ideas, no Gentile ways of the culture, and just try to figure out what God is saying to you. If you can't do this, you're not going to be able to do it. If you can't stop judging authority, then I'm sorry to say it, but if you do that, you're judging God. Remember, this is a Jew speaking to Jews and Gentiles in a totally corrupt Roman Hellenistic system, and he says it to them. Just like America today, that's right. So if he can apply to them, we can apply to us. We have no business judging authority. None. And if you're judging that authority, you're never going to hear God through it. Never. Because you're too busy judging it. There is no authority except from God. And those which exist are established by God. Yikes! I don't like that any more than you do, but it's reality. And they who have opposed, resisted, will receive what? Come on, what does it say? And another word for condemnation is judgment. And I'm telling you, you can only get one of two things. You can get judgment from God, musar, correction, or you can get teaching from God. There is no in between. You'll receive judgment on themselves. Because rulers aren't a cause of fear for good, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what's good. You'll have praise from the authority. The authority is a servant of God to you for good. Just like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. But if you do what's evil, you should be afraid, because it doesn't bear the sword for nothing. It's going to get you. Who brings wrath on the one who practices evil? These people bring wrath on the one who practices evil. So it's necessary, look at this. It's necessary to be in subjection. Now, in the New Testament, it's usually translated in obedience, which is a horrible word. It's not even biblical. But subjection is to be under somebody, under. To be in subjection. Not only because of wrath, but also for the sake of your conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes. Rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Pay to everybody what is due them. And it's not your business what's due them. It's their business what's due them. That's their job. If you don't like it, do something about it. But do it biblically, if you can. Tax to whom tax, custom to whom custom, respect to whom respect, honor to whom honor. And it all starts with respect and honor. It's not our job to judge the authorities, whether they're a good authority or a bad authority, or making a good decision or a bad decision. It's not our place. It's our place to see what God is saying to us. Here's the problem. It comes through them. Shefa comes through people. All bureaucracy and government and military and education has rank. Some of you are good at this, some of you are bad at it. I was horrible at this. I'm starting to get much, much better at it. But I was horrible at this. I just hated this idea of rank and people over me and making bad decisions. What did they say? And my dad was a colonel in the army. So I knew about rank. So, the question is, what's going to flow down in Shefa? Teaching or Musar? Deuteronomy 16 again. Set up the judges, and they'll judge the people in Mishpat Tzedek. So now we have God's overarching Mishpat Tzedek, and he trickles it down to who? Who does he trickle it down to? The judges in Israel. So now we have like the Sanhedrin and the big, I don't know if you know what the Sanhedrin is. It's like the Supreme Court of Israel. Right next to the temple, connected to the temple, judging by Torah. And that's over the whole nation. And under them, Deuteronomy 16:19. Do not pervert judgment, take no bribe, for bribery perverts divrei tzadikim. So now you have people who have to judge underneath the big judge. The big judge. So you have the big judge God, then you have the smaller judge Sanhedrin, then you have a smaller judges in each city court making righteous judgment. And then you have each individual's righteous judgment, as it says in Leviticus. Do not pervert judgment. In righteousness, you individually shall judge. But tzedek, tishbot, judge right. You shall judge individually, righteously. Do you hear what I'm saying? It trickles down through people. And it's all Jewish. It's all Jewish. And by doing this, God guaranteed to get the kingdom into Israel, at least some. And the more they judged righteously, according to what was flowing down from the top, the more Israel would reflect the kingdom. Yes? And as soon as they deviate from that and pervert and twist the words, what happens? It falls apart and it starts looking like the Gentiles. Pretty simple. So what's going to flow down? Light and teaching, or Musar and judgment? So we're going to go back to this passage that we were looking at. Blessed is the man whom you discipline, and whom you teach from your Torah, and whom you teach from your Torah. Two totally different things. So we are going to get both, guaranteed. We're going to get discipline and we're going to get teaching. It just depends on us how much we get of each. That's all. You start thinking about, the government does this and the government does that, and I'm not going to follow this, and you're gone. You're a million miles away from righteous judgments. You're not hearing God. You're away from the way we hear God. You've left it. The trick is to have those people that are part of the shefa process, tax collectors, your boss at work, rank in the army, rank in whatever world you're in. This one tells this one, which tells this one, which tells this one, which tells this one, and it finally gets to us. And what are we going to do with it? If we hear them, our immediate supervisor, guess what we just did? We heard God. Because it started with God. Say it trickles down 4 layers and it gets down to our immediate supervisor and they say something to us and we go, I'm going to open up a court case. We're done. Did we hear God? No answer. Did we hear God? You can only either hear the shefa or not hear the shefa. If you ignore it, you don't hear it. If you pay attention to it and you soften your heart and you go, yes, I hear you. I hear you. Thank you for telling me that. And by the way, I did this week with my immediate supervisor. I walked in the door and immediately, as I was thinking about this teaching, it happened. And I acted it out. And she said, Michael, walk with me. And she basically spanked me. And you know what I said? Thank you. Thank you. I love it. You got it. I'm with you. So I know what I'm talking about. God made me act it out immediately as I was thinking and developing this teaching. And remember, the whole point is of this process so that you may grant him relief in the days of adversity. It's not to make you feel bad. It's not to make your life worse. It's to give you relief when things get bad. But you keep resisting, so what do you think is going to happen? It's going to get hard. It's going to get worse. And you're never going to be happy where you can hear God talking through your whoever it is over you. Now, if you don't think you have people over you, you got a bigger problem. Because then there is no shefa, and there is no authority from God, and the whole structure doesn't exist anyway, and you might as well just go be a pagan because you're your own God. Because this is the way it works in Judaism, and there is no in between. The Lord's not going to abandon his people or leave his inheritance because judgment is eventually going to return to Mishpat Tzedek, so you might as well do it now. So God's teaching comes. He, whatever it is he's saying to us, different for everybody. If we receive it, we immediately get, Mishpat Tzedek, done. Woo, thank you. I know how to make a judgment. Thank you so much. Done. And move on. But if we don't, if we resist, what's going to happen? Immediate discipline, immediate musar. But it's going to come through, and I'm telling you this because I know it to be 100% true. That's the only reason I'm saying it. I've run this experiment for years now, and I know it's 100% true. It's going to come through humans. It's going to be human beings that do this, not God somewhere in your little silent place in your prayer closet. That's not how it works. It works through humans. It works through humans. That's how shefa works. So the discipline's going to come through your immediate supervisor, and then you harden your heart and say, I'm not going to listen to that. So what happens? They kick it up a notch. But it's really flowing down. And then their supervisor gets involved. And you go, I ain't going to listen to that. I don't care if they're a higher rank. I'm not listening. So what's going to happen? God's going to kick it up a notch, which is really shefa downward to you. And the discipline comes from their supervisor. And then you're cooked. Because if it gets high enough in the rank, who's the last one? God. And he will break you, and you're done. He will break you till there's nothing left. And I've seen it happen with many, many, many believers. That they resist and resist and resist, and they won't listen and won't listen and won't listen. And eventually, God just goes, okay, fine. Later days, Jack. I'm done. And he just kind of turns them over to all the mess of this world. And God only knows what can happen. And I've seen it happen. But all of it is about judgments and shefa. And it flows down to us. It's how all of it works. On the good side, just like I told you with Abraham, he did Judaism. What happened? Judaism spoke to him, and what did he get? He got faith, knowledge of God, right? Guess what happened? His rank went up with God. So what happens with us is we listen, we get immediate mishpat tzedek, righteous judgment, and then we get more teaching, more revelation, more light, and we go up higher and higher in our rank with God. So you go lower in rank or you go higher in rank. But what you cannot ever do is stay the same. Judaism doesn't work staying the same. So every morning, we're supposed to be praying this prayer. I'm not going to say it's supposed to be. It's in the group of things that we're supposed to be adding to our life. It's there when you want to add it to your life. This is what we're supposed to be adding to our life. This is one of the prayers. I don't like this prayer, by the way. I had a really, really hard time. I still don't have it 100% down, but I got maybe 90%. I don't like it. It's got a bunch of words in it that I don't really understand, so it's been hard for me. But I'm getting it. Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu. May be your will, Lord my God and God of my fathers, to protect me this day and every day from, what this says is arrogant men and arrogance, personal arrogance, from other people's arrogance and my arrogance. Protect me from that. From a wicked man, from an evil friend, not like a neighbor, a friend, companion, a friend, from an evil neighbor, and from an evil occurrence, from an evil eye. Now, most of us can read that and go, yes, yes, Lord, protect me from that, protect me from that. But then we come to the part where we start feeling sorry for ourselves. And we're like, I was at work, and I was just doing my job. I was just doing what I need to do. And some parent came and complained about me. And they lodged a complaint against me. And now I got to go to the central office, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. That's shefa. That's shefa. That's the righteous judgment. But because of our own selfish bent, we feel sorry for ourselves. They hate me. They're attacking me. And so we apply this prayer and say, oh, Lord, please, please protect me from a malicious tongue and slander and false testimony and men's hate and calumnious charges, instead of going, that's God trying to talk to me. Yeah? Open your ears and listen to what God says to you. Instead of shutting your heart down and saying, they hate me, they're mean, they're making false judgments, they don't know right from wrong, they're bad and they're this and they're the other. Instead of going, man, I am such an arrogant jerk that I can't even hear that guy or girl or whatever. Shefa works through humans. It works through your supervisors, your bosses, your parents, whoever. So this is dangerous here. I'm getting now where I can pray this, where I with a clear heart, I think I can pray this. Keep me from a malicious tongue. I mean, like I said, I did it a few days ago. I walk in the building, and my supervisor says, come here, walk with me. And she tells me, she rebukes me. And I said, thank you. And I heard God. And done. I felt great. And it's like everything just kind of flipped. And I felt wonderful. And I'm still thinking about it. I'm thinking about what God said to me through her. All right. That's why I have this prayer here. Because you got to be able to pray this prayer without self-pity, without thinking, oh, they're attacking me. But what is God saying through them, and why? Because it's shefa one way or the other. It's either discipline or it's teaching. Blessed is the man whom you discipline and whom you teach from your Torah. And it goes from, by shefa, from covering to covering, from authority to authority, from rank to rank. Now, just for the sake of you from a Christian world understanding what I'm saying, because I've not used one single Christian phrase today. So just so you know what I'm saying, in the New Testament, there's a lot of verses that use a phrase, hupotasso, which means, it's Greek, meaning under the hand. It's translated obey or submission. There's a lot of verses that say that, because there's a lot of verses in the Torah that say that. But when you read it in the New Testament, it sounds like we're just supposed to go, I shall submit. That's not what it is. Hupotasso means under somebody else's hand. They have their hand over us. They're our authority. Whether we want them to be our authority or we do not want them to be our authority. They are our authority. And where does all authority come from? Hello? Where does all authority come from? All authority. All. From top to bottom. All authority. Yes? Okay. So hupotasso, submission, is an incredibly important subject in Judaism. And I want you to understand what I'm saying so that you can relate to it. So that you may grant him relief from problems and trials, because judgment is eventually going to return to mishpat. Mishpat is eventually going to return to tzedakah, righteousness. So we might as well do it now. And that's how we get Judaism into our life, which means the kingdom into our life, so we get to know God better. Now, if you don't want to know God better, just go home. But that's what we're talking about. This is how you get to know God better. So you're going to have to obviously change some stuff about the way you think. Because we're in America. We're in America. And it's a huge problem. Hebrews 12 says this. By the way, when I first read this passage, I utterly rejected this passage. I think I'd been a believer 3 years, and somebody showed it to me because I was such a jerk. And I said, I'll tell you where you can shove that. That's how I said it, too. I hated it. Hated everything about it. And over the years, it was like, oh, I keep seeing that in Judaism. And so now I can see it as a Jew within Judaism. It wasn't taught to me as a Jew within Judaism. It was taught to me by Christians in a Christian sense, which is why I rejected it. Nobody ever taught it to me from Judaism. Now I get it. My son, do not regard lightly the musar of the Lord. Don't take it like a small thing. It's a big thing. Or faint when he strikes you, because the Lord disciplines everybody that he loves. Everybody. I remember one time I was complaining to my rabbi, Rabbi Bach, and I said, why this and why that and why this? Why? And this is what he said. You know, like, Michael, and he was really cool about it. You know, Michael, sometimes it's not raining on you, it's just raining. Isn't that why? Sometimes it's not raining on you, it's just raining. In other words, why are you so obsessed with you? The Lord loves everybody that he disciplines. He disciplines every child, not just you, everybody. And he scourges, whoosh, whips. The word is makot, stripes. Gives stripes to every child that he accepts. Every child he accepts. Quit complaining about you being spanked by God and do something about it. Just knock it off. If you want something to change, change something. Get your heels up out of the ground and listen to the authorities over you and change by God. And I guarantee you things are going to change. I guarantee it. God's going to deal with you like children. What child is there that his father doesn't spank? I mean, come on, really. But if you're without spanking, without musar, without discipline, of which everybody's become a partaker, then you're a bastard. You don't even have a parent anyway, if you're not spanked. Right? Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Okay. You get one way or you get the other way. But you can't have it both ways. Then you're a bastard. You're an illegitimate child, a mamzer in Hebrew, a bastard. And you're not a child of somebody. Also, we had earthly fathers to discipline us, and we respected them. And there's the problem. You don't respect God. I don't respect God. As soon as we resist that shefa, we do not respect God. We're showing him disrespect. And there's the problem. I don't know where I am. We respected them. They disciplined us for a short time, whatever seemed best to them, and they probably screwed the whole thing up, but they did what they thought was right. But he disciplines us for our good, musar, so that we're given, relief from problems and trials when they happen. Right, because he's nice. He disciplines us for our good so that we can share his holiness. That's just like a big way to say what Psalm 90 says. I can't remember what the verse was. That 92? That psalm? I can't remember what it is. That's all it's saying. Same thing. For the moment, all discipline seems not to be pleasant, but painful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, trained by shefa, trained by doing it over and over and over again, it yields, look what word it uses. How do you like that for a tie-in? It brings us right back to the first verse that we looked at. It yields the pri shalom letzedakah, the peaceful fruit of what? Righteousness. So make righteous judgments. You see what I'm saying? This discipline brought us right back to the fruit of it, which is mishpat tzedek, righteous judgments. So I thought God wrapped this up in a bow really, really nicely. I didn't expect that verse. I didn't remember it. And I'm like, wow, that's a beautiful full circle that makes perfect sense. So obviously you have some homework to do. Yeah? You have some homework to do. We all do. We've got to learn how to stop resisting authority, because when we do that, we're resisting God. It's that simple. I don't care how you define it. I don't care how you question it. It's not going to do any good. It's not going to change a single thing. It's above our pay grade, and we're not supposed to be doing it. What we're supposed to be doing is figuring out that flow. God said this, then it went here and here and here. And here it comes, and then it hits me. What was it? What is he saying? And then respond to it good. That's what we got to do. And I think I've explained it about as good as I can do. So, I'm going to ask, are there any questions?
Is this the short version?
Does anybody have any questions about this?
I do, but I think it's probably too long of an answer.
Okay.
I'll ask you later.
All righty. Okay. I've done as good as I can. Let's stand for the Aleinu. Stand for the Aleinu. Let's stand for the Aleinu. Let's stand for the Aleinu. Lord, thank you for your order, your seder, that you set up and gave to Israel. Well, once we see it, you can't unsee it, but it's hard to see. But thank you for explaining it. Thank you for teaching it. Thank you for revealing it in your Torah by your Spirit. And I ask that your Holy Spirit would help us to implement Shefa in our lives so that we can have and do Mishpat Tzedek, some righteous judgments more and more in our life. In the name of Yeshua. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. Let us adore the Lord of all, who in greatness created the world from of old, that he has not made us like the nations of the earth, he's not made us like the families of the land, he's not made our destiny like theirs, he's not cast our lot with all of them. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz b'yom hahu b'yom hahu Yeh Adonai Echad, Ushamo, Ushamo, Ushamo Echad. And it shall be said, the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. Va'anachnu korim. Umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech, malachei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. And we bend the knee and bow in worship and give thanks to the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed be he. We acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. There's nothing but him. As Torah says, know that the Lord, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Ein od milvado. There's nothing else but him. Let's quickly come down and do Kiddush, please.